From Washington, this is the HPS Macrocast with Hamilton Place Strategies and Markets Policy Partners.
Hello, it's January 21st, Friday, the third Friday in... Is it the third Friday? The third Friday in...
Sounds about right.
In 2022. I'm John Fagan from Markets Policy Partners, and this is the HPS Macrocast, minus Tony Fratto and our usual HPS hosts, and Brendan, my partner, Brendan Walsh, and I will be running the show here this week, and we're bringing in a very special guest, Fanta Traore from the Sadie Collective. She's going to be joining us for a wide-ranging discussion on economic topics and focusing on the Fed, the new appointments to the Fed. So it is another choppy week in financial markets. Some mixed financial, some mixed economic data, some uneven corporate earnings, and we've just seen equities, U.S. and globally, tilted further to the downside this week. Even though Treasury markets have stabilized to some extent. Obviously, some of the heartburn here is centered around geopolitics with all of the headlines, the disturbing and disquieting headlines on the Russia-Ukraine border. But also, are the typical boogeyman that's been stalking markets for a while, the inflation story. It's certainly still with us, and with a Fed meeting coming up next week. That's certainly front and center in the minds of the markets as well. So, Brendan, Treasury Secretary Yellen was pretty sanguine in her comments on inflation. She's maybe not in team transitory anymore, but seems pretty close. She was expressing not necessarily a prediction, but a hope that inflation gets back to a pretty normal range by the end of the year. Do you think she's got a leg to stand on here?
It's interesting, too, because obviously it's a unique situation where she's at the head of the Treasury now, but she was the former head of the Fed. So, she has to be somewhat cautious with her words, where she's speaking as the head of the Treasury, not the head of the Fed. But she did make a fairly strong case that, we are starting to see some signs that, especially in the parts of the economy that have been affected by the supply chain, and that's the result of the prices going up a lot, like something like used cars and semiconductors and things like that. Knock on wood, it seems like the supply chains are starting to become a little more unbundled, and those prices should come down throughout the course of 2022, but it'd probably be the second half of the year. The Fed has made that big pivot, however, and it would be weird to immediately pivot back. But on the flip side, the market, I think, has gotten a little bit too hawkish, where now some people are talking about the March meeting, they need to hike by 50 basis points. I don't see that happening. You also have to, I'd be interested in your take, Fanta, too, because the Fed over the last 10, 15 years, 20 years really, has become much more dovish just naturally, where the natural rate of unemployment is a lot less than we thought it was previously. We still don't really know what it is, but it's a lot lower than we assumed previously. And also something that we've talked about previously, the Fed doesn't want to go back to that 2% inflation target. They'd like it to be a little higher. So I think that the idea that we're going to hike, 6 times in 2022 doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
It is the 7% consumer price headline number really gets a lot of press. But actually next week, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, which is core PCE prices, is coming out. That's due on Friday for the December reading. It's expected to be elevated at 4.8. Up slightly from 4.7 in November, but not as bad as some of these other headline numbers that we've certainly seen reactions to in the press. But so before we get too deep into the Fed's reaction, I want to kick it over to Fanta for her to talk about the Sadie Collective and what she does there, a little bit about her background to introduce us, and then we can get into her thoughts on the Fed, the new appointments, and how they should orient themselves to the policy landscape. Fanta, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. So I'm Fanta Traore. I'm co-founder and CEO of the Sadie Collective, and we are the first American nonprofit organization that's focused on building the pipeline and pathway for Black women in economics and related fields. And those fields include finance, data science, and public policy. These are all domains where Black women are severely underrepresented. And so in this moment, I'm very thrilled to hear about the Fed's new appointments, the nominees who have been identified by the Biden administration, of which include Dr. Lisa Cook and Philip Jefferson. And if both are confirmed, that would be the first time we're seeing two Black Fed nominees who are serving on the Board of Governors at the same time. And so it's a really exciting moment where Dr. Lisa D. Cook is the first Black woman to be nominated for this position. And we are having Philip Jefferson, who's the fourth Black male to be in that position. And so he's joining a legacy of Emmett Rice, Andrew Brimmer, as well as Roger Ferguson. And Roger Ferguson, I should say, is one of our advisory council members of the Sadie Collective, which is pretty exciting to have him supporting and guiding and stewarding some of our efforts at the collective. And so it's a really exciting moment that we're in here. I personally have been mentored by Dr. Lisa Cook. I've taken a course with her at Michigan State. And in fact, my own economics journey is possible because of her. I had a really exciting moment when I was living in South Africa after I went to Howard University, where I had the opportunity to choose between the American Economic Association summer program or working at Chemonics, and using my French-speaking background, exploring questions of African affairs. And so I was in a moment where I didn't know what I wanted to do, but because I spoke with Dr. Lisa Cook and she took basically 2 weeks out of her time to encourage me to pursue the economics route, I then went on to work at the Fed. And now we have this incredible movement of young Black women from all across the United States and also globally who are engaged with exploring economics and taking their career further in the economics discipline.
I think that's absolutely amazing. Yeah. I mean, I have an economics degree and I spent a lot of time at economics conferences, and it's amazing how everybody looks exactly the same. And so what you're doing is amazing. And even more importantly, we kind of have this idea that economics is a science like math because we use math in it. But in the end, it's just it's a social science, and people's experiences play a huge role in how they look at the economy. So it's insane to not have various diverse opinions coming, especially at the level of the Fed, where they're making huge decisions.
Absolutely. So to have Dr. Cook in this seat is really inviting a diverse set of opinions to the table. And so she's an HBCU graduate. She's studied at a school in Senegal called Cheikh Anta Diop University, which I also studied at. And she has a global perspective on her economics work. And so having served in the Obama administration, served on the Biden transition team, though, and also worked at various leading universities from Stanford to Harvard, to being very engaged in the pipeline of diversity in economics. All of that equips her to provide a unique perspective. So I'm really looking forward to what she's going to do. And I'm also curious about the timeline for confirmation and whether that will be happening sooner rather than later.
Do you have any insights? Have you heard anything of the time frame, what they're planning?
I am not sure. I'm not clear on what the timeline is looking like, but I have commented to the New York Times and others about why it's so important to confirm someone who's Black this time around, and also to finally introduce those perspectives. So I definitely had my thoughts around the need for this diversity, and not clear on timelines, but hopefully sooner rather than later, because it's overdue, and those perspectives really create better policy. And so that's what we need.
Yeah, so we had both Powell and Brainerd went up to the Capitol Hill, the Senate, last week? So I suppose we haven't voted on them yet, but their testimony has already happened. So I suppose the path is cleared for the next. How many has he appointed? Four new people beyond Powell and Lael Brainard?
Oh, I can't.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes,
I think it's
right.
4. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, Biden really has an amazing opportunity to really reshape the Fed going forward, because these aren't 2-year appointments. These people will be there for a while.
Right. Yes. And it'll also be the first time that we have 4 women on the Fed board. So,
oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that's also an angle of diversity that's needed too.
And a woman at the head of the Treasury. Yeah.
Taking a step back and looking, these new nominees are coming into a Fed that is the subject of a philosophical debate, clearly among economists and policymakers and interested folks in this space. And the Fed's mandate, the dual mandate, right, is full employment and inflation, and steady inflation, steady price pressures. And it's been juggled a little bit, redefined, obviously, in recent years. But there's a sense that the mandate is that mandate is broadening to encompass new realities that are underneath some of these issues. And the Fed is coming under some criticism from some quarters, Larry Summers prominently among them, talking about how the Fed should, essentially kind of stick to its narrow remit. How do you frame this particular issue when you look at it, and the power of the Fed, and how the power of the Fed can be deployed responsibly and in a manner that's suitable and aligned with, the overall mission of its institution?
Yeah, so the dual mandate is of concern of the Fed. And when we think about the unemployment numbers, there is room for more nuance in how we're assessing that. And so Chief Economist Janelle Jones at the Department of Labor, who coined the framework Black Women Best, which means when the economy works for Black women, it's working for everyone, has introduced this terminology, which really enables a better assessment of the economy, and also just it's catchy, it's easy to remember. And so I think that's the kind of lens that we need to see more of. And I have no doubt that Dr. Lisa D. Cook is going to bring that forth. We see that with Dr. Cecilia Rouse, who's currently chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, and who emphasizes that when she's assessing the economy, it's important for her to see what the unemployment rate looks like for Black women and other people who live at these intersections, so like women of color and so forth. And December's job report shows the reason why we need to be paying attention to disaggregated data. And so that report shows that while unemployment is low for Black women, it actually rose in the month of December. And while analysts have said that the data for this population is volatile, the reality is also that there is some inconsistencies that we're seeing for them. And there is an impact that's happening to Black women because of the sectors that they are overrepresented in due to inflation, et cetera. And so that's an approach that I like to see the Fed be more engaged with, the consideration of that disaggregated data. And with the race and research series that they recently did over the past summer, so over the summer of 2021, there has been more conversation about the Fed's role in considering race. And overall, the economics discipline is starting to have these conversations and is getting more engaged, but it should become commonplace that for all of us, for our Econ 101 classes, that race is introduced as a variable that does impact outcomes. And there are researchers and scholars who are doing that work, and I'd love to see more of a consideration of that moving forward. So that looks like hiring researchers who are doing work that considers the nuances of race as it relates to environmental economics and all of the issues that we're concerned with moving forward because of the 4 pandemics, as the administration describes, that we're in. So we're talking about the economic crisis, the racial crisis, the climate crisis, and health. And it does have a disproportionate impact. And so when we address that disproportionate impact for those who are most marginalized, then we're able to really get better outcomes for everyone. And that's what we're aiming for.
Thank you so much for your perspective on it. It really is such an important issue when you look at, they say that the president of the United States is the most powerful person in the world. Well, a lot of people would say it's the Fed chair and the other Fed governors and colleagues there are not far behind. So absolutely right in the thick of things when it comes to the way economics impact real people and daily lives. We're going to take a quick break there and come back and talk a little bit more about Fanta's priorities in her research and economic thinking, and cover the long-awaited Fed white paper on the digital dollar, CBDC, stablecoins, et cetera. What does the Fed have to say on that front? We'll dive into it when we come back.
Markets Policy Partners provides sophisticated financial market analysis that is independent, accessible, and actionable for a broad audience. Learn more at marketspolicy.com or visit them on Twitter @marketspolicy.
And we're back on the Macrocast. Fanta, what are some other things that you are working on personally and the Sadie Collective is focused on in the area of economics and the impact on daily life and populations and so forth?
So I have my hands pretty full, and that's partly because I'm in a dual degree graduate program. So I'm at Yale and I'm studying for my master's in policy as well as my MBA. And so that is one part of my life that I put on pause to focus on the Sadie Collective and growing us and really allowing us to be a movement that is nuanced in nature. And we work closely with HPS. And so that's been a really awesome ride. So as far as the Sadie Collective, we are in our 4th year in terms of planning for our annual conference. And our conference experience is one that flips the economics conference on its head, in that we're featuring Black women economists from different disciplines, and we're talking about economics. And we're doing this over a 3-day period over Black History Month. And we do so honoring the legacy of Dr. Sadie T.M. Alexander, America's first Black economist, of which Dr. Lisa D. Cook is walking in the footsteps of as her sorer of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And so overall, the Sadie Collective is a huge priority, and we just hired our first couple of full-time staff in this year, and we're really growing. We're growing from just being a team of early career women who were exploring the space of economics, that is. And so we're now being able to put resources behind really developing this community so that Black women are no longer the only ones in their classes, in their fields, and in their workplaces. And so it looks like being pretty multifaceted in our approach with the programming that we do, the content that we create, and the stories that we tell. And so it's been a pretty exciting time so far. And we have also done some exploring and branching out because apart from building that pipeline and that program, there's a reality that we all got into this field because we wanted to explore economic questions. And exploring economic questions means that we're using the economic toolkit and the ability to take a better look at the dynamics of power through that economics toolkit and create a change. And so we're consulting with an organization right now where we're helping them to build a woman of color wealth building strategy for young women and Black women more broadly in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. And so there are quite a few avenues that we've been exploring in this past year, and I have been enjoying working with our team, growing it, and really making it so when we look at the future of economics, Black women are included and are leading the way.
It's a very powerful work that you're doing, and sorely needed. Clearly, right now, as you said, I mean, the Fed is focused on is now out to sea on its definition of full employment, and I think that when we look at something like inflation, the Fed was obviously toying with this idea of focusing much more on the kind of the metrics by population and by more impacted groups and so forth. But the inflation issue has upended them and taken precedence. When you think about inflation from an economic perspective, obviously, on one hand, inflation can be is very pernicious and is very hard on lower income strata of the economy and society. But on the other hand, inflation it's a very nuanced beast, and the way that we measure it is very confusing, because when you look at the way that inflation has been extremely low for years, childcare and healthcare and schooling and some of these other costs that maybe aren't captured particularly well in the metrics have not been low and have been weighing on people's pocketbooks and wallets for a long period of time. So when you think about inflation from your perspective, how do you see this current dynamic and its impact on the broad spectrum of society?
If I'm not mistaken, the minimum wage hasn't been increased since 2001 across the board, across America. And so when it comes to this question of inflation and the communities who are most adversely impacted, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about their purchasing power and the fact that it hasn't been expanded, for them being overrepresented in these industries that during the pandemic, we've started to call essential worker positions. And so that is a terminology that recognizes their importance and their value add to the economy. And so that ranges from home health aides to caretakers to nurses to people who are every day working outside and who aren't necessarily on Zoom calls all day, like many of us have the luxury of doing. And so for those populations, inflation means that they have less purchasing power, and being able to expand the benefits that they have access to from healthcare options to also increasing their minimum wage, I think goes a long way. And so I think that is something that we need to be exploring more as a nation.
It certainly is front and center in the debate over Build Back Better, the political debate over Build Back Better, exactly. and the American Families Plan. That's almost like forgotten at this point, is another multi-trillion and very socially focused a bill that the Biden administration obviously wouldn't be getting to before the midterms by any stretch of the imagination now. But the debate over Build Back Better and its impact and how it relates to inflation, I think you really hit the nail on the head when it comes to this kind of debate, which is on one side, you have President Biden making the case that this is an answer to inflation. It's not inflationary. It's providing the kinds of support and fiscal support for the people that are most impacted by an inflationary or a higher inflationary environment. And the other side of the debate, typically the Republican side of the debate, but for certainly not entirely Republican. There are plenty of like Larry Summers and some of the other folks that are more in the traditional economic realm are talking about how fiscal spending writ large is inflationary, and this money that we've poured into the economy to support people during the pandemic has fueled this great spike in prices.
Economics has a diversity problem. The Sadie Collective is the first and only organization dedicated to addressing the pipeline and pathway problems for Black women in economics, finance, data science, and public policy. Named after the first African American to earn a PhD in economics, the Sadie Collective seeks to support and inspire the next generation of Black women in these career fields. To learn more about the collective and how you can get involved, email sadiecollective@hamiltonps.com or visit sadiecollective.org.
The Sadie Collective is very active in organizing conferences. There's one coming up in February. Can you tell us a little bit about the speakers and what you're working on in preparation for this event?
Yeah, so I'm thrilled that this is our fourth conference, and we're partnering with the Urban Institute again for this one. And we were initially looking at having the experience be hybrid, but with Omicron and all the unpredictability, it's completely virtual. And since we have had the experience of exploring that this past year in 2021, having a virtual experience, we're looking to take it a step further and a step up for our members. And so we're exploring a virtual swag bag component for everyone who's attending. But we also have a really great lineup of speakers and who span from across the world, because we have that flexibility with it being virtual and our membership also expanding internationally. And so speakers range from Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, who is currently a fellow at Yale and former Minister of Education of Nigeria and founder of Transparency International, which is a transparency index for governments. So we have people like herself. We also have others like Hope Wallenstock, who's doing really awesome work at the Economic Security Project and exploring what it looks like to have guaranteed income in Georgia. And Georgia is a really exciting state to be looking at right now with the governor elections coming up, with the midterms. And so it's interesting perspective that all of our speakers are bringing forth. And the overarching theme is going to be transparency and accountability. And how do we cultivate economic shifts with accountability and community? So this theme came together from our team and them diligently thinking about what is it that our members are interested in. And coming off the heels of 2020 and 2021, there's definitely an interest in what does it look like to hold institutions accountable who have made large commitments recently towards what it looks like to address questions of anti-racism as it relates to whatever domain that they are in. And so the speakers are going to be talking about that. Some of them have started think tanks and sectors or domains within their institutions that speak to addressing issues of race. And we want to know, what does it look like to do that in action, and where does economics come into play? So it's a really exciting lineup, and I encourage everyone who's listening to check it out or spread the word so that we're able to have our largest conference yet. Every year it gets bigger and more exciting, and we're looking forward to engaging high school students this year and really expanding the Sadie Collective's impact.
That's great. Such an important topic, and dynamic participants and virtual swag on top of that. Thank you so much.
Check out HPS Insights, a regular podcast from Hamilton Place Strategies, bringing you the latest on policy debates affecting the business and political communities. Available on the HPS podcast channel on your favorite streaming platforms, including Apple, Spotify, and Google. Tune in to the latest episodes and learn more at hamiltonplacestrategies.com/podcast.
One of the other places where the Fed is making its viewpoint known and trying to take a balanced approach is in the question of the digital dollar and central bank digital currencies in general. The long-awaited and somewhat meaningfully overdue white paper was published by the Fed yesterday afternoon. It wasn't expected to be a dramatic, unveiling of a bunch of concrete steps in a particular direction, and it wasn't. But it was obviously a well thought out, well researched, and cogent approach, but leaves plenty of probably more questions unanswered than than it actually clarifies for us. And just to get your sense, Brendan, on where was the Fed really expected to come out on this, and what is the paper really telling us here?
Yeah, it's almost like they were just kind of forced politically to take a stand on this. Crypto has become a thing, and everyone is involved in it, NFTs and things like that. But more importantly, China really is dedicated to creating a digital currency for China. They're doing it for probably the opposite reasons of why we would be interested in it. They would love to have a digital currency to know exactly what every Chinese person is spending their money on. it's much more to as a means to further take control within the Chinese government. The U.S., I feel they kind of just had to put a marker down and be like, okay, we're not behind the curve. We do understand that central bank digital currencies exist. We know them, but they've then pushed it off to Capitol Hill to say, here's what we know about it. We could do it if you wanted us to do it, but we're going to leave it up to Congress to make that decision.
Right. That's one of the key factors. The Fed basically, punting is such a loaded term, isn't it?
Yeah, but it kind of was. Yeah.
But but to be fair, the Fed really, with something as consequential as this, forging ahead without buy-in from the executive branch and Congress to a significant degree would be institutionally a pretty significant.
And it really is. And punting is the wrong term, but they are making the right choice. This is a big decision that would shape, the way that we spend money, the amount of the government is allowed to see into your bank account and everything like that. So, you're opening up a can of worms if you're going to do a central bank digital currency. Some good things can come from it, but also there's some drawbacks, especially in terms of privacy.
Yeah, and when it comes to clearly one of the things they're wrestling with is how to get digital dollars, digital currency into a format that helps the people that need helping most. When you talk about like a digital dollar, a lot of Americans kind of don't
already do it.
A whole heck of a lot of paper money.
Your credit and debit card is it's basically a digital dollar. We don't actually use currency, especially now after the pandemic. But a central bank digital currency really can do a lot, especially in terms of cross-border transactions. It can lower the cost of when you have to exchange money from one currency to the other. That's still monstrously expensive. And that's something that a digital currency really can, it can basically do it for free.
To give the broad population the benefits of efficiency in a digital dollar environment. One of them is one of the natural things is disintermediating the existing banks, because a lot of people that you're trying to help aren't in the formal banking system. And one of the points that the Fed makes, what they want to see in a digital currency, they don't come down on one side or the other, whether we should or whether we shouldn't. They set up some pros and cons, and the conclusions are limited to some of the features that they would want to see. And one of them is intermediated by the current financial system. They don't want to cut them out, and that leaves the same issues of inclusion and financial inclusion basically in the digital currency environment that they would be imagining. It's obviously not a fait accompli that it would come out this way. And certainly there's the very basic question of, if you have limited access to the internet, limited access to a smartphone that isn't necessarily updated or has data all month, how can you efficiently be involved in a digital currency ecosystem? And the paper obviously poses a lot of these questions and kind of lets them hang out there. As I said, it leaves a lot of question marks, but it opens up a relatively lengthy comment period from now to May 20th, and a set of questions that it is seeking comment on from the public, from institutions and interested institutions. And so this is, I think, a great venue for people like us and interested groups like the Sadie Collective to make their voices heard in something that is otherwise pretty hermetically sealed kind of debate.
No, and it's very interesting too. But a lot of the reason why the current banking system is how it is, and why a lot of these things are as expensive as they are, is because of KYC AML. It's know your customer and anti-money laundering, which is the Treasury's in charge of it. The crypto community has not been able to account for that. They basically say we created these systems to not be able to do that. So you can't ask us to know that whether somebody's laundering money or not. A central bank digital currency would have a similar problem. Either you as the government follow everything that everyone's paying. So you as the customer are essentially telling the government exactly what you're doing, or you don't do it. There's really no in between. So I think this transition from the current banking state to the digital world is going to be a little stickier than technology could allow it to, simply because of the legal ramifications.
Yes, and I wanted to jump in here because on the topic of cryptocurrency, what a survey from University of Chicago shows around who is investing in it, about 44% of those in the US who are identifying as people of color. And so these are people who are coming from populations that are not doing so well in the financial market at large, but they are interested in exploring the cryptocurrency space. And so it'd be interesting to sort of reconcile the reality of digital currency, cryptocurrency, and the banking system at large.
Totally agree.
It's let's all jump into the Fed's comments section for the open comments between now and May 20th and tell them what we're thinking. So let's take a last break here, and we'll come back and talk about what is coming up on next week's macro calendar.
Every 2 weeks, HPS measures U.S. adults' feelings and expectations for the economy. The Civic Science Economic Sentiment Index, powered by HPS, accurately measures movements in overall national economic sentiment and provides a more sophisticated alternative to existing economic sentiment indices. To learn more, contact us through HamiltonPlaceStrategies.com.
And we're back on the Macrocast. Brendan, what is next week bringing us on the macro calendar?
Yeah, so as you mentioned earlier, the Fed has their first meeting of 2022, which I suppose the expectations are for them to hike in March. So this would be the meeting that you kind of set that table for. They also later in the week will get the personal income and spending data for December. And within that report comes their preferred inflation measurement, the PCE price index, which, as you mentioned earlier, also is significantly lower than the CPI, the consumer price index. We also get Bank of Canada monetary policy decision, and then we get global PMI, both manufacturing and services PMIs from the major economies, countries around the globe. So we'll see, especially this will be January numbers. So this will include the effects that Omicron has played, especially in terms of the supply chain.
Yeah, and fourth quarter earnings season is rolling along as well. Yep. Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, Visa, Caterpillar, Intel, McDonald's, Halliburton, IBM, 3M. The list goes on. Household names. Some of these are going to be very front and center in how they're dealing with inflation. How they're dealing
so
with
far, it's been a fairly disappointing earnings season.
Yeah, it's been pretty uneven so far. So places like McDonald's, which don't usually feature so prominently in sort of the macro narrative when they give their earnings, will be much more in focus now as they talk about staffing and increased input prices. So it'll be another interesting week. Well, thank you so much for joining us here on the Macrocast this week, the Tony-less Macrocast. We're lonely without him, but we were thrilled to host our special guest, Fanta Traore from the Sadie Collective, who was generous enough to share her time and insights with us. Thank you so much, Fanta.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Macrocast. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share.